The second semi-final in the VFL was between old rivals Williamstown and Port Melbourne. David Rees-Jones, we came to Northport Oval with high hopes for a great contest, and what we got was a dominant performance from Williamstown, as good as we've seen them, and a complete blowout.
Yeah, it certainly was, and they really did to Port Melbourne what Port Melbourne like to do to opposition teams, and they chased them, they harassed them, they tackled hard, they hit the ball hard. They hit the man hard, and they were just fantastic. And the pace of a lot of the Williamstown players really did upset Port Melbourne, and they just made mistakes. They were, whether it was the week before, the effort they put in that took its toll on them, we'll never know. But they were just a totally dominant team today, Williamstown, and they're going to be hard to beat going into next week's game against Geelong. And
we saw the goals from Anastasio a moment ago. He sets up Vespremi with a goal here. Vespremi kicked a couple, and at quarter time it was 6-5 to 1-2. And really, I'm not sure that was an accurate indicator of just how dominant Williamstown were, because as you said, it was in every single area. They were too quick, they were too physical, they were too clean with their handling. They just did everything to excellence, and Peter German's got to come away from that thinking that's about as complete a performance as I've seen from my team over recent years.
Yeah, and you've got to give credit to Peter German too. I mean, first to inspire his team, I mean, obviously putting that physical side and saying, well, you know, Port Melbourne have done this to us time and time again, and we need to stand up and be men instead of copping it, you know, every time we play Port Melbourne. Great goal there by Anastasio. He is an absolute little dynamo down in the forward line, and he's in everything. He's a beauty, but just a terrific team effort. And I thought the matchups, Jack Johnson onto Chris Kane, he did a terrific job, the young fellow, and picked up a fair bit of the ball himself. So, you know, not only restricted Chris Kane, who's one of the better players for Port Melbourne, and his influence, but picked up a lot of the ball himself. Lockwood was fantastic.
He was terrific.
I mean, you just go through the team. You know, Cameron Wood, I thought he was terrific in the ruck. He really did control the rucks all day.
Yeah, problem is he may not be there next week, and that is a massive question mark for him.
Yeah, look, he got reported, and it doesn't look too good, but keep the fingers crossed, because you hate seeing players miss finals through suspension.
It turned out in the third quarter, we talked at the start of the third quarter about the fact that a blowout might be on the cards because it's the nature of semi-finals and knockout football at times that does happen. But I don't think anyone would have expected that they would have kicked 12 goals to 4 in the third quarter, and then all Gary Ayres could do in the last quarter was to say to his troops, OK, win the last quarter. Julian Rowe finished up with 4 last quarter goals and finished with 6 for the match. They did win the last quarter 8-1 to 6-2, but that's an indicator of just the fact that the sting had completely gone out of the game long ago.
Yeah, well, look, in that third quarter, Port Melbourne, they were a bit undisciplined. They come out, there are a few blokes more content to play the man instead of the ball, and that really did hurt them. And you know, it was unnecessary. They were you know, well behind anyway. And what Williamstown have done, they've raised a very high bar for themselves, and they got the flag favourites next week in Geelong, and that will be a great match.
They had 50 more disposals. Port Melbourne had more marks because they were forced to chip the ball around, and the inside 50s really tell the tale. Port only able to go in 35 times and Williamstown in 66 times, and that ended up with probably the second highest score that Williamstown have ever kicked against Port Melbourne. They were just a few points shy. In fact, their score was 3 points shy of their highest ever score against Port Melbourne, but that doesn't matter. They're through to the preliminary final. 27-14, 176 to Port Melbourne, 14 goals, 5, 89. The final margin, 87 points. Willie setting up a date with Geelong in the top 4 in a week's time.